Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into a story that, on the surface, it looks like just another sports scandal, maybe a bit weird.
Yeah, but when you look closer, it's actually, well, it's kind of the blueprint, isn't it, for this whole age of digital deception we're living through right now.
Exactly. So if you're tuning in, you might be thinking, okay, are we talking about the first big political deepfake? Or maybe some, AI ghost cooked up to mess with the markets?
That's where your head goes now, right? When you hear fabricated reality. It's all about the tech, the AI.
And that makes sense. We are talking about a fabrication, a massive one that completely fooled the country. But the source code here, it wasn't algorithmic, it was human.
Purely human. Meticulously built. The ghost in this machine wasn't AI. She was constructed piece by piece by a single person dealing with, well, a lot.
Her name was 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, and this wasn't some minor blip on the radar.
Oh no, this was huge. A massive sports story. A media saga. It just completely consumed the US back in early 2013.
And it gave us this really crucial, maybe often overlooked lesson about, trust and reality in the digital world.
Definitely. So our mission today, our deep dive, is to unpack this whole Manti Te'o and 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 story. See it as the sociological precursor to the deepfakes and AI chaos we worry about now.
Because this story shows just how easily a perfect narrative, one crafted from human suffering and real intelligence, can just sail past all the journalistic checks, all the balances.
It's the case study, really, how legacy media can get totally invested in a beautiful lie, and how the public, well, if you give them a choice between a messy truth and a simple tragic myth.
They pick the myth. Almost every time.
It's a story about failure, absolutely. Journalistic failure, personal failure. But it also ends up being about resilience, which is maybe the surprising part.
Okay, so before the whole thing collapsed, we have to understand the myth itself. And to get the scale of the deception, you first need to grasp just how high Manti Te'o was placed on that pedestal. He was built up as the ideal American hero.
Yeah, the hype was real. He was widely seen as a generational talent. Just this powerhouse middle linebacker playing for Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame, in college football mythology, that's the absolute peak, isn't it? It's the most storied program maybe ever.
Yeah.
And he was their guy.
He was their golden boy, absolutely.
In his whole persona, that was key. He wasn't just a great player. He projected this aura of deep decency, purity almost.
Came from Lae, Hawaii, deep Polynesian roots. And crucially, he was a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A devout Mormon.
And that faith aspect, you're saying it's not just background detail, it's central.
Oh, totally central.
Yeah.
Because it gave the media the perfect explanation for the defining characteristic of his relationship with 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
Which what?
That it was chaste, purely online, and never involved, physical intimacy. And for the media narrative of Te'o as this wholesome hero resisting the usual temptations of college stardom through faith, it fit perfectly.
Right, so it made this online-only thing seem noble, almost part of his character.
Exactly. It reinforced the image, which in turn made the media incredibly receptive to the tragedy that supposedly struck during his senior year, 2012.
And that timeline of grief, if you wrote it in a script, you'd say it was too much, too unbelievable.
The dates are just stark. September 11th, 2012. His actual grandmother, Annette Santiago, she passes away. That's a real painful loss for anyone, let alone a young guy in the spotlight.
A very real loss.
And then literally hours later, on September 12th, he gets the news. His girlfriend, 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, has lost her supposed long private battle with leukemia.
Within 24 hours. Grandmother, then girlfriend.
It's staggering, and the media reaction, immediate. Overwhelming. Suddenly, the very real grief for his grandmother was almost overshadowed by this impossible operatic tragedy of losing his girlfriend at basically the same time.
And then came the moment that cemented the myth, turned it from just sad into, inspirational.
3 days later, September 15th, Notre Dame is playing Michigan State. And Te'o, the grieving hero, takes the field.
And he doesn't just play.
He dominates. Just immense. Racks up 12 tackles, leads the Fighting Irish to this crucial win that keeps their undefeated season going.
Wow.
And that visual, him playing through what everyone believed was this profound double grief.
Yeah.
It was instantly hailed like the most heartbreaking, most inspirational sports story in years, maybe the decade.
It wasn't just a football game anymore. It was proof.
Proof of his character, his faith, his dedication. He's carrying the team, carrying this immense personal burden, all driven by the memory of his lost love. It was perfect.
A perfect setup. Undefeated Seiken, national championship hopes, Heisman Trophy buzz, all wrapped in this incredible story of tragedy and resilience.
Couldn't have written it better,
Okay.
which maybe should have been the first clue.
Okay, so Tio is the hero figure, but let's look at the ghost herself, 𝐾𝐄𝐄𝐏. The persona. It was constructed with, like, remarkable precision, wasn't it?
Absolutely stunning precision. And understanding who she was supposed to be tells you a lot about what the hoaxer knew Tio and the media wanted.
So who was she?
Supposedly, a 22-year-old student at Stanford University, shared Toyo's Polynesian background, shared his deep Christian faith. She was presented as his sort of spiritual and cultural counterpart.
Stanford, Polynesian, religious. It fits the narrative perfectly.
Perfectly. And then there's the nature of the relationship itself. The reporting at the time said they met on Facebook back in 2009.
Okay.
And from then until her supposed death, the entire thing existed in the digital realm. Text messages, long late-night phone calls.
Yeah.
That was it.
And again, back in 2012, this wasn't seen as that weird because of his faith.
Exactly. His devout Mormon character provided the easy explanation. It emphasized the chaste nature, the spiritual connection over the physical, made it seem plausible, even admirable.
And the backstory they built for her, it wasn't just leukemia, was it?
No, they layered it for maximum sympathy. Before the supposed cancer diagnosis, the story was that Lene had been in this near-fatal car accident in April 2012.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was apparently during her recovery from that trauma that the doctors discovered the leukemia.
So it's not just illness, it's accident then illness. It's relentless suffering.
Exactly. Drawn out, intense suffering. It wasn't a sudden tragedy. It was this quiet, private battle that Tio was supposedly helping her fight through texts and calls, showcasing his loyalty, his dedication against these impossible odds.
Which brings us to the media's role, because they didn't just report this, they amplified it. Became complicit, really.
Utterly complicit. And the main vehicle for that was the huge Sports Illustrated cover story, October 2012, written by reporter Pete Thamel.
And that piece, it wasn't exactly hard-hitting journalism.
Not even close. It was pure hagiography. You know, writing about someone like they're a saint. Thamel's article took this tragedy and cemented it in the public mind using these incredibly intimate, heart-wrenching details.
Details that maybe should have raised flags.
Absolutely should have. But instead, they just sold the story harder. Sold more magazines.
Can you give an example? What kind of details are we talking about?
Well, the one that became really famous, the one that just defined the whole pathos of it all, was this idea that Tia would call her hospital room.
Yeah.
And he'd stay on the line while he slept, just so she could hear him breathing through the phone.
Oh, man.
Right. I mean, that level of poetic intimacy,
Yeah.
it just bypasses your critical thinking. You read that, you feel the depth of his love, and the instinct to actually check the facts just, it melts away.
So the media was chasing the feeling, not the facts.
Totally. But it went deeper than just lazy reporting. Tio's own family actually got involved in sort of bolstering the story's real-world credibility.
How so?
Well, his father, Brian Tio, gave an interview to the local paper, the South Bend Tribune. And in it, he stated that Manti had met Lene in person, that she'd even visited Hawaii.
Wait, his dad said they'd met physically.
He did.
Yeah.
And that tiny detail, that assertion of a physical meeting, was crucial. It made the whole relationship seem much more real, much less suspicious to a public maybe wary of online-only romances.
It grounded the story in the real world.
Exactly. It transformed it from maybe a weird internet thing into a proper, tragic love story with real-world connections.
And Tio later admitted that wasn't true, that they never met.
He did. He confessed later that was a lie. The people closest to him were maybe trying to protect him or just caught up in it. But they were actively, publicly adding this layer of physical reality to something that only existed in messages and phone calls.
It shows how the lie started to spread, to metastasize, from maybe a private embarrassment to this public protective shield.
Precisely. The narrative was becoming too big, too important to let inconvenient facts get in the way.
But perfect stories, as you said, are fragile. And this one started to crack. The first really visible fissure came on the biggest stage possible, January 7th, 2013.
Yeah, the BCS National Championship game. The culmination of that perfect, undefeated, tragically motivated season for Notre Dame.
They're playing Alabama.
Yeah.
Millions watching.
And it was an absolute beatdown, a humiliation. Notre Dame gets crushed 42-14. And the narrative just imploded right there on the field. Tio, the Heisman finalist, the hero playing through grief. He looked slow. He looked lost. completely outmatched by Alabama's offense.
So the guy who supposedly transcended tragedy suddenly looked, well, swallowed by it.
Exactly. The golden armor visibly cracked. And the national spotlight, which was already intense, just magnified like crazy. People started asking questions.
The timing felt right for the truth to come out.
It really did. And 9 days later, it found its way. An anonymous tip lands in the inbox of Deadspin.
Okay, Deadspin. This is important, right? Because they weren't like Sports Illustrated.
Totally different beast. Deadspin was this irreverent sports blog, deeply skeptical. They kind of built their brand on tearing down the exact kind of myths that legacy outlets like SI love to build up.
So SI had a stake in the myth. Deadspin had a stake in destroying it.
Pretty much. And this tip they got. The reporters who worked on it, Timothy Burke and Jack Dickey, they described it as an atom bomb. It basically said the whole 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 story, the girlfriend, the tragedy, it was all fake.
Wow. So what did Burke and Dickey do? Did they need, like, high-tech forensics?
Nope. That's the kicker. They used basic, old-school, shoe-leather journalism, the kind of stuff the big magazines had completely skipped.
Like what?
Like checking for a death certificate.
Yeah.
The most fundamental check you do when someone supposedly died. They searched national public records, state records, Social Security databases for 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏. Nothing. Zip. No death certificate, no official record that a 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 had ever died, or really had ever existed in the way she was described.
Okay, that's big. Did they stop there?
No, it went further. They used the specific details from the media reports, the supposed location of her burial in Carson, California. They started calling funeral homes in that area.
Yeah.
Same result, call after call. Nobody had ever heard of 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏. No funeral, no burial, nothing.
So the story that captivated millions for months
Was debunked by a few database searches and some phone calls. Work that, honestly, should have been done before SI even thought about putting him on the cover.
It's kind of shocking how simple the verification was.
Yeah, it really is. But the media failure, it actually gets worse. It goes from being maybe lazy to something closer to, like, journalistic malpractice.
How?
This came out after the Deadspin story broke. The Stanford Daily, the student newspaper at Stanford University.
Where 𝐃𝐄𝐄 supposedly went to school.
Exactly. They did some digging and found something pretty damning about that Sports Illustrated piece.
What did they find?
They discovered that SI's reporter, Pete Thamel, had actually been told by Stanford University officials before his cover story was published
Told what?
that the university had no record of any student named 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
Wait, hold on. SI knew. They knew Stanford had no record of her before they ran the story calling her a Stanford student who died of leukemia.
That's what the Stanford Daily reported. Stanford told SI she wasn't registered there. And SI ran the story anyway without mentioning that massive red flag.
That's unbelievable. They just ignored it.
Thamel later kind of tried to frame it as a sign they missed in hindsight, but yeah, they buried it. That single piece of contradictory information, a simple, verifiable fact from the university itself, would have completely blown up the perfect narrative they wanted.
So they chose the story over the facts. Actively.
It really looks that way.
Yeah.
They chose the poetry of the tragedy over the basic due diligence of checking if the main character actually existed as described. The media wasn't just fooled here. They were, as the analysis puts it, invested in the lie.
Wow. Okay, one last piece then. The photos. If 𝐃𝐄𝐄 didn't exist, whose face was everywhere, on TV, online, in magazines.
It's been figured that out pretty quickly, too.
What?
Basic reverse image search.
Yeah.
The photos led straight to the social media profiles Facebook, MySpace of a woman named Diane O'Mara, a 23-year-old marketing executive living in Los Angeles.
And she was.
Alive,
Yeah.
healthy, had never met Manti, had no idea her pictures were being used.
So how did the hoaxer get her pictures?
She explained they were old photos, stolen from her public high school social media accounts by someone she used to know.
For Naya Tuiasosopo.
For Naya Tuiasosopo, the same person Deadspin sources identified as the architect of the hoax. So, January 16th, 2013, Deadspin drops the article. Manti Tao's dead girlfriend, the most heartbreaking and inspirational story of the college football season, is a hoax. And boom, everything changed.
Okay, so the hoax explodes. The immediate reaction back in 2013 was just laser focused on the person behind it, right? For Naya Tuiasosopo.
Absolutely. The public conclusion was pretty swift and pretty harsh. This was seen as just incredibly cruel. A sophisticated, malicious deception designed purely to humiliate this big star athlete. That was the narrative.
Malice, cruelty, simple villainy.
Yeah. But the real story, the real motive, turned out to be way more complicated, more nuanced,
Yeah.
and honestly more heartbreaking than just simple malice.
And it took time for that fuller picture to emerge.
It took nearly a decade, and a pretty significant cultural shift in understanding, particularly around identity.
You're talking about the 2022 Netflix documentary, Untold.
Exactly. That documentary was crucial because it introduced a vital piece of context that was just completely missing, completely incomprehensible to most people back in 2013.
Which was?
Naya Tuiasosopo came out publicly as a transgender woman and now goes by Naya Tuiasosopo.
Right.
And understanding her struggle with gender identity, it fundamentally reframes the entire motivation behind creating 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
So instead of a calculating male villain,
Naya was able to explain, finally, that creating 𝐃𝐿 wasn't about hurting Tio. It was an escape for her. It was this desperate way to try and live out the female identity she felt completely suffocated by in her real life.
especially with family pressure.
Huge pressure.
Yeah.
Especially the expectation that she, presenting as male then, would follow the family path and become a football player. 𝐿 became this online space where Naya could actually be Naya, emotionally vulnerable, authentic in a way she couldn't be offline.
So Linnea was fictional, but the emotions Naya poured into her were real?
Very real. And the connection with Teo, that became devastatingly real for Naya too. They bonded deeply, shared Samoan heritage, family values, their faith.
And Naya confessed?
She confessed that the whole thing went off the rails because she genuinely fell deeply romantically in love with Manti Teo through the 𝐿 persona.
Wow. That makes it so much more tangled.
It's incredibly complex. It stops being a simple story of a villain and a victim. It becomes this tangled tragedy of identity where someone profoundly conflicted creates a fantasy, falls in love within that fantasy, and it spirals completely out of control, ultimately hurting everyone involved. Teo, Diane O'Mara, whose identity was stolen, and Naya herself.
Okay, but for Teo's side, he fell in love too. Not just with the idea or the text, but with a voice, right? Those long phone calls.
Yes. And the voice is probably the most enduring mystery, the most contested piece of the whole mechanical puzzle.
How did Naya Tuiasosopo, presenting as male in 2013, manage years of intimate phone calls that convinced Teo he was talking to a woman named Linnea?
Well, there are conflicting accounts. Right after the hoax broke, Naya, then identifying as Ronaya, went on Dr. Phil. Huge interview.
I remember that.
And on that show, Naya claimed the voice was 100% hers. Even demonstrated on camera how she could shift her voice into the higher pitch she used for Linnea.
And did people buy it?
It was mixed. Some were convinced, others were deeply skeptical that someone could maintain that kind of vocal performance that convincingly for so long over so many calls.
So what's the alternative theory?
Well, other reporting, particularly from outlets like ABC News and the New York Post, suggested Naya had help. They pointed fingers at Naya's female cousin, Naya Tuiasosopo.
An accomplice.
The theory was that Tino might have been brought in around 2011, maybe to make the phone calls more sustainable, more believable as the relationship deepened.
Was there any evidence for that?
There was some technical analysis. ABC News hired audio experts who listened to voicemails Tio had saved from Linnea.
And their conclusion?
Based on the acoustics, the frequencies, they concluded it was basically impossible that it's a man talking. They strongly suggested it had to be a biological female voice.
So we have Naya saying, it was me, and audio experts saying it couldn't have been.
Exactly. It creates this central contradiction. Was Naya an incredibly gifted voice mimic, driven by the need to express her identity? Or was there an accomplice involved, making the mechanics of the deception more practical?
It's interesting that the 2022 documentary really leans into Naya's ability to do the voice herself.
It does. It frames it as part of her genius for impersonation, tying it back to her internal identity struggle, which, makes for a cleaner narrative than involving accomplices. But it leaves that core technical question sort of ambiguous.
It's fitting, maybe. A story built on layers of deception has a mystery about the voice at its heart.
Definitely. And it's a potent reminder, even back then, of how voice could be manipulated or misrepresented, a precursor to the AI voice cloning we see today.
And we can't forget the other victim here, Diane O'Mara.
Absolutely not. She's the third primary victim. Her face, her actual image, stolen from her own life, became the public face of this massive national lie.
Just pure identity theft. Her photos give the whole thing a visual credibility it never deserved.
And she spoke out very early, in 2013, warning about this exact thing. About how vulnerable you become when you live your life online, how easily your image can be snatched and used without your control. She was incredibly prescient about the dangers we're all much more aware of now. So today we hear this story, and the word that jumps out is catfished. Manti Teo was catfished. But we really have to transport ourselves back to 2012, early 2013, to get why the public reaction was so immediate and so harsh.
The term itself was brand new, right?
Barely existed in the public consciousness. The documentary Catfish only came out in 2010. And the MTV show, the one that really popularized the term and the concept, that had only premiered in November 2012.
Just 2 months before the Teo story broke.
Exactly. So when Deadspin dropped that bombshell in January 2013, the public didn't have this readily available framework of empathy or even understanding for victims of online deception that we kind of have now.
What was the general feeling about purely online relationships back then?
Deep skepticism, even hostility sometimes. Online dating was still kind of niche, maybe a bit suspect. The idea that you could have a profound, life-changing love affair entirely through texts and phone calls, that struck a lot of people as naive at best, suspicious at worst.
So the reaction wasn't, oh, that poor guy got tricked.
Not initially, not for many people. The dominant, almost visceral reaction, especially in the sports world and comment sections everywhere, was condemnation. It was, how could he be so stupid? How could this big, famous athlete be that gullible?
The complexity was just too much. People jumped to the simplest, most cynical explanation.
Pretty much. The immediate assumption, the one that took hold really fast, was that Teo had to be in on it somehow.
In on the hoax? Why?
The theory was that he, or someone around him, fabricated the tragic story for publicity, to boost his image, maybe help his Heisman campaign, and his strong Mormon faith. That was seen as the perfect, convenient cover story for why the relationship was always online, never physical.
Wow, so people thought he was the manipulator.
That was a very strong, very loud current in the immediate aftermath.
Okay, so Notre Dame, his university, they must have been scrambling.
Oh, absolutely. Full-blown crisis mode. The athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, held this big press conference. He was adamant Teo was the victim. A perfect mark, he called him, for a very cruel deception.
Trying to control the damage.
Trying desperately. But in his attempt to be transparent, to lay out all the facts as the university understood them, Swarbricker revealed the one detail, the one date, that just completely destroyed Teo's credibility for many people.
What was the date?
December 6, 2012.
Okay, what happened on December 6th?
According to Swarbrick, that was the day Teo received a phone call from Lene's number, and the person on the other end claimed not to be dead, claimed to be Lene, still alive.
Whoa. So Teo knew something was seriously wrong, or that she wasn't dead as early as December 6th?
That's what Notre Dame stated. And then Swarbrick revealed that Teo only officially informed the university about this strange call, about the possibility of a hoax, 3 weeks later, on December 26th.
3 weeks. That gap. That's the problem.
That gap became the smoking gun. Because in those 3 weeks, between December 6th and December 26th, Manti Teo continued to talk publicly about his dead girlfriend.
He kept the story going, even after the phone call.
He did. Most notably, just 2 days after that call, on December 8th, he was in New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation. It's the biggest media moment of his life up to that point.
Yeah.
And he was asked about the tragedy. And he spoke about Lene, his fallen girlfriend, perpetuating the myth, knowing, based on that phone call, that the story wasn't true, or at least wasn't what he thought it was.
Okay, I see it now. That's the lie. The lie wasn't creating the hoax, but continuing it after he had reason to believe it was false.
Precisely. That instantly flipped the narrative for so many. He went from maybe a naive victim to someone who actively chose to perpetuate a lie, perhaps for sympathy or accolades, even using his grandmother's real death as emotional cover.
So he had to speak for himself, right? Address this discrepancy.
He did. He sat down for a major on-camera interview with 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
How did that go?
Public relations-wise. Mostly seen as a disaster. He seems uncomfortable, evasive at times. He couldn't provide the clean, simple sound bites people wanted because the truth wasn't simple.
But did anything truthful come out?
Yes. Amidst the awkwardness, you could see the raw, human reality. He admitted he was scared, he felt in too deep. The story, the myth, had become this enormous thing way bigger than him, and he didn't know how to stop it.
He lost control of the narrative.
Completely. But the most crucial admission, the thing that really got to the heart of why this all could happen, was when he talked about the very first lie. The small, private lie that started it all.
What was that?
He admitted that he had lied early on to his own father. He told his dad that he had met Lene in person.
Even though he hadn't. Why? Why tell his dad that?
This is the human part. He said he was embarrassed, just purely, simply embarrassed, ashamed to admit to his family, his friends, maybe even himself, that the woman he was falling in love with, pouring his heart out to, was someone he'd never actually met in the physical world.
That makes sense, especially for a guy with his background, that public image.
Exactly. That one moment of insecurity, that understandable human failure of pride, that was the crack in the foundation. He was this young, famous, deeply religious guy, too ashamed to admit he had this secret, intense, purely online relationship. And that vulnerability, that little lie born of embarrassment, allowed Naya's elaborate fantasy and the media's hunger for a perfect story to just completely take over his life.
The fallout from this, professionally, financially, it must have been devastating for T.O.
Immediate and catastrophic. Before January 2013, Manti Te'o wasn't just a good prospect. He was seen as a guaranteed top 10 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Millions of dollars guaranteed.
And after the scandal broke,
His draft stock just plummeted. He was instantly labeled toxic. NFL teams, the consultants they hire, they weren't just questioning his talent anymore. They were questioning his character, his judgment, his stability.
trustworthiness factor.
Huge factor. In the NFL, drafting a player, especially high up, is a massive financial investment. The uncertainty around T.O., the sheer weirdness of the story, the questions about his honesty, it made him seem like an unacceptable risk for many teams.
And did his performance reflect the turmoil? I remember hearing about the NFL Combine.
Yeah, the Combine performance was kind of the physical confirmation of the collapse. This is a big pre-draft workout where prospects try to impress teams. It was T.O.'s chance to show he was focused, physically ready despite everything. But his performance was widely seen as a disaster. He ran a much slower 40-yard dash time, that key speed metric for linebackers, than expected. Like 4.82 seconds, which is not great. He just generally looked tentative, maybe mentally elsewhere.
A symbolic collapse, almost.
It really felt like it. It seemed to validate all the new skepticism about him.
So what happened in the draft?
He fell hard.
Yeah.
Completely out of the first round, where all the biggest money is. He eventually got picked 38th overall in the second round by the San Diego Chargers.
Which is still the NFL, but financially.
A massive difference. Dropping even a few spots in the first round costs millions. Dropping out entirely. An absolute financial catastrophe compared to where he was projected.
And the public humiliation.
Oh, it was brutal. He became an instant punchline. Late-night TV hosts, internet memes, just relentless mocking. In 2013, Forbes actually named him one of America's most disliked athletes.
Alongside who?
Alongside guys like Lance Armstrong, people involved in sophisticated cheating scandals. Te'o's crime was essentially being incredibly naive and then lying out of embarrassment. But the public condemnation put him in the same category. It was intense.
Did the media outlets that built him up, like Sports Illustrated, did they reflect on their role at all?
There was a brief, uncomfortable moment of it. The outlets that got fooled were definitely embarrassed. You saw some scathing editorials, especially from places like the Stanford Daily, really taking aim at SI and Pete Thamel.
Asking the right questions.
Asking why they didn't do the basic checks, why they failed to do the due diligence that could have saved Te'o all that shame and misery, as one editorial put it.
So the argument became that the media was partly responsible.
Yeah, a strong argument emerged. The media built the pedestal way too high, way too fast, based on a narrative they desperately wanted to be true. And when it inevitably crumbled because it wasn't based on fact, they channeled their own institutional embarrassment, the shame of being so easily duped into condemning T.O., punishing him, in a way, for their journalistic failure.
And for almost a decade, that's kind of where the story settled. T.O., the punchline, the catfish victim, the guy who maybe lied.
Pretty much. He played in the NFL for several years, quietly, decently, but always defined by the shadow of the girlfriend who didn't exist. Naya Tuiasosopo's story, her complex motives, were mostly ignored or reduced to just cruelty.
Until the Netflix documentary in 2022, Untold, that seemed to really shift things.
It fundamentally changed the public perception, absolutely.
How did it do that?
It did two really important things that just weren't possible in the media frenzy and, frankly, the less aware cultural climate of 2013. First, it gave Naya Tuiasosopo a real platform.
To explain her side.
To talk openly about her gender identity struggle. It allowed the audience, now operating with a decade more cultural understanding around trans issues, to finally hear her motive, not as malice, but as this desperate escape, to hear it with some compassion and context.
And the second thing?
It let Manti Te'o speak. Not the scared, defensive kid in the 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 interview, but a mature Te'o, a husband, a father. He could finally tell his story with the benefit of time, distance, and emotional hindsight.
Talk about the shame, the fear, the healing.
Exactly. And seeing him like that, hearing him articulate his experience with that maturity, It completely reevaluated him in the public eye.
So he wasn't the fool or the liar anymore.
He was recast. He became a symbol of resilience, someone who endured this incredibly public, incredibly cruel humiliation right at the dawn of our modern digital nightmare world. He survived the first big mainstream sociological deepfake, if you will.
And today, how's he viewed?
He seems to have successfully reclaimed his narrative. He works as an analyst at the NFL Network now. He's a respected voice in the football world, the same world that almost completely chewed him up and spat him out. His legacy seems to be shifting towards survival, forgiveness, rather than just gullibility. So when we pull it all together, this whole deep dive, the story of Manti Teo and 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, it really wasn't ever about AI, was it? Not about complex tech deception.
No, it was about something much older, much more fundamental. Human flaws. Loneliness, definitely. Shame, a huge part of it. The struggle with identity for Naya, naivete for Teo.
And that relentless hunger from the media machine, that need for a perfect hero, a perfect story.
And that hunger, as we saw, led actual respected news outlets to make an active choice. They chose the beautiful narrative over the inconvenient facts. They published the myth, even after being explicitly told a core part of it, the Stanford connection, was false.
Right. And the simplicity of the hoax, in retrospect, should maybe worry us more than some super complex AI scam. Because it proves how vulnerable the media, and by extension the public, is to narrative perfection. The tech almost doesn't matter if the story feels right.
We also saw how quickly the public rushed to condemn Teo, not for being cruel, but for being stupid, gullible.
Which really reflected that 2012 skepticism, that lack of a framework for understanding digital trust, digital deception. He ended up being punished for the failures of the journalists who amplified the lie and for the public's own ignorance about the realities of online life back then.
And that original lie, Teo telling his dad they'd met just because he was embarrassed.
That's the pivot point, that small human moment of shame. It cost him millions, his reputation, almost his entire career. It's just this brutal lesson in the potential price of private embarrassment when it intersects with public life.
So it leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Especially for today.
A really crucial one. Think about it. The Teo scandal broke when catfish was a new word. The deception involved stolen photos and maybe some voice modulation stuff, easily debunked by basic checks, as Deadspin showed.
Checks that the mainstream media failed to do.
Exactly. Now, fast forward to today. We live in a world saturated with AI-generated voices that can mimic anyone. Deepfake videos that are getting harder and harder to spot. Synthetic media created out of thin air. The tools of deception are exponentially more powerful, more invisible.
So if established journalism failed to spot the obvious red flags back in 2012, when the methods were comparatively crude,
and if the public's immediate reaction then was to condemn the victim based on gut feeling and skepticism, rather than digging for complexity.
what does that say about our collective ability now? In this world of sophisticated, algorithmic deception, how equipped are we really to tell truth from fabrication when the fabrication is potentially flawless?
That's the unsettling legacy, isn't it, of this story? The sociological deepfake, built by hand, it showed us the weaknesses in the system, in ourselves, and the technology has only gotten better since then, have we?
That is definitely something to think about. A lot to mull over.
Indeed. Until our next deep dive.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.